So how is it even possible for one person to be completely human and completely divine all at the same time? I know it sounds like a riddle, right? But it's actually one of the deepest, most mind-bending paradoxes in early Christian thought. And today, we're going to unpack it.
I mean, right off the bat, you're hit with this huge contradiction. How can a single being be all-powerful and also grow weary? How can someone who's immortal also die? Or an all-powerful being feel hungry or tired? This is the central puzzle that theologians, philosophers, you name it, have wrestled with for centuries. And it's the mystery we're diving into right now.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll lay out the paradox. Then we'll get into the why behind it, the how it could even work, what came out of it, and finally, why this all matters for the idea of salvation.
All right, let's dive into section 1. We really need to get this straight from the get-go. We're not talking about some kind of demigod, half god, half human. No, the claim here is way more radical than that. We're talking 100% divine and 100% human existing at the exact same time in one single person.
And the source text itself just lays this contradiction out there for us, plain as day. It talks about how he grew weary, got hungry, even wept. I mean, these are deeply, profoundly human experiences, right? And yet, in the very same breath, the text says he had impassible and naturally sovereign power. Now, impassible means you are incapable of suffering. So, how on earth do you square that circle? It seems impossible.
Okay, so to even begin to understand how this could work, we first have to tackle the why. I mean, why would a divine being choose to take on all these human frailties? The text is pretty clear on this. It wasn't a sign of weakness, far from it. It was a deliberate, intentional act with a very specific goal. So, why do it? Well, the text gives us the core reason right here. It was a profound act of obedience. He chose to do it. He voluntarily accepted what it's like to be human, the exhaustion, the hunger, all of it. This wasn't some kind of defect or a flaw in the system. This was the mission. Yeah, there's actually a theological term for this. It's called divine condescension, and it's a brilliant way to think about it. Now, don't think of condescending like looking down on someone. It's the exact opposite. It's about voluntarily lowering yourself to someone else's level. The text puts it beautifully. It's like a master choosing to become a servant just so he can redeem the very people he calls his fellow slaves and servants. I mean, talk about a radical act of empathy.
Okay, so we've got the why. It's this voluntary act of obedience for the sake of salvation. But that still leaves us with the huge, massive question of how. I mean, how can two totally opposite realities, divine and human, exist in one person without, just canceling each other out? Well, the answer to that is where things get really, really interesting.
So if you were to just lay it all out, the problem looks kind of like this. On one hand, you have the divine nature. Can't suffer, can't die, all-powerful. And on the other hand, you have the human nature, can suffer, is mortal, and is in the position of a servant. I mean, these aren't just slightly different. They seem completely, logically incompatible with each other.
So what's the solution? Well, these early thinkers came up with a really specific and super important term for it, hypostasis. This word is the absolute key. A hypostasis is the single underlying person, the individual reality that holds it all together. You can almost think of it like the container that holds both of these natures. But, and this is so important, the natures aren't blended together, like mixing red and white paint to get pink. No, they stay totally distinct, even though they're united in that one person. And the source text is incredibly clear about this. It calls this an unconfused union. The person, that hypostasis, is the single agent who is doing the acting, and he preserves both realities perfectly. He remains impassible by nature and passible, immortal and mortal. The really crucial part to get is that he isn't flipping a switch, being divine one minute and human the next. He is both, fully, at the exact same time. So, here's the bottom line for this section. This is not a hybrid. It's not some new third thing that's part God, part man. Nope. The divinity stays 100% divine. The humanity stays 100% human. They're just held together, perfectly distinct, inside that one single person. All right, so if the natures stay distinct, that leads to the next big question, right? How does this person actually act in the world? What happens when both divinity and humanity are working through one single agent? Well, this leads to a really fascinating idea, a completely new kind of energy.
And this new way of acting has a name. It's called the theandric energy. The word itself is pretty cool. It's a mashup of the Greek words for God, which is theos, and man, anthropos, so God, man, energy. And what it describes is one single action that is simultaneously 100% divine and 100% human, all performed by that one person, using both of his natures.
Now, I know that sounds super abstract, but luckily the source text gives us this incredible analogy to help make it concrete. It says, think about what happens when you heat a sword in a fire until it's glowing red hot.
Okay, let's break this analogy down. A sword, what does it do? By its very nature, it has the energy to cut. Simple enough. And fire? By its nature, it has the energy to burn. Right. So what happens when you get that sword glowing hot in the fire? You have a fiery sword. It's still a sword, and the fire is still fire. But now, with just one swing, it performs a single action that does two things at once. It cuts and it burns. You've got two different energies working together in one singular activity, and neither one gets confused with the other.
And that is the perfect model for this theandric energy. So think about it. Christ performs a divine act, like a miracle, healing someone, but he does it through a totally human action, like physically touching them or just speaking a word. That single act is both human, the touch, the voice, and divine, the miracle itself, at the exact same time. One action, two energies, one person doing it. This all brings us to our final and honestly most important section, because this is all really fascinating theology, but so what? What's the ultimate point? Why is this whole idea of two natures in one person so absolutely central to the concept of salvation?
Well, according to the text, the ultimate purpose is nothing less than the healing of human nature itself. See, by uniting the divine with the divine nature gets to work from the inside of our nature. It's through the human experience of suffering that he destroys corruption, and it's through the human experience of death that he creates indestructible life. The divinity literally uses our humanity as the tool to fix it.
And this is where the implications just explode. They get massive, because this isn't just a story about one unique person in history. No, the union of the divine and the human in this one person shows a brand new potential for all of humanity. It's suggesting that human nature itself is capable of being united with the divine and not being wiped out in the process.
And that leaves us with one last pretty profound question to chew on. If that barrier between the finite and the infinite, between mortal and immortal, if that could be bridged even once in this one person, what does that say about the ultimate destiny and potential of every single one of us? It's a paradox that, once you start to unpack it, really opens up a whole new way of looking at pretty much everything.